Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I'm Kevin Klein. I am joined by two of my Winnipeg Sun colleagues. We have Lawrence Pinsky, KC, who is a former human rights adjudicator, and Royce Coop, who is a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba. Gentlemen, thank you once again for joining me. This is going to be an interesting show because I think right off the bat, I have to say how shocked and surprised, but pleasantly surprised I am that at some of Carney's actions over the last week. We have to give credit where credit's due. He's helping the steel industry, and leaders from that industry are coming out and applauding Carney for that. And I want to talk about the pipeline. I mean, I, for one, all of us were saying we need to get a pipeline. We need to get a pipeline. We're not getting it. And here we are today with an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between Premier Smith of Alberta and Prime Minister Mark Carney, with EB flying off the deep end and not being involved and kind of canceling it. But you would have to agree that these are some significant changes in the approach that we were seeing earlier, Royce.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big shift from the Trudeau era here in Canada. I think that we have to separate some of the elements of this MOU from the pipeline. There's stuff in this agreement that is good for Alberta. Some of the caps, the kind of difficult, the clean electricity regulations. Alberta's getting a break on some of those things, and that's going to be very useful for development, for spurring development, oil sands development in that province. I think that's good. It's good for Alberta, but what's good for Alberta is good for the country as a whole. And so I think that's fine. The centerpiece of this was the pipeline. And I think people do need to realize this MOU is not automatically going to lead to a pipeline. There's still a lot of work that the government of Alberta has to do to get there. Obviously, they're pretty committed to that, and they're gonna work towards that. But the Prime Minister was also not entirely clear on what was required for this. In question period, he said that First Nations in British Columbia and the government of British Columbia would need to sign off on any pipeline before it was built, before we were allowed to have tankers coming to the BC coast. And so it's not clear to me that this is going to happen. There's good stuff here. You're right. I don't want to just dismiss everything here, but I'm not totally sure we're going to end up with a pipeline at the end of this. I'm afraid that we're getting kind of led down the garden path here.
Yeah, I think it's more political than real. When you actually look at the MOU, it's like a Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger's cat in physics both existed and didn't exist at the same time. This pipeline is not Schrodinger's cat in that it does not exist, but the memorandum of understanding is not enforceable. It's an agreement to agree. It's a very first stage, and those problems that we've all talked about for ages still exist. They still persist. That is, the structure of the Canadian economy, those restrictions still exist. These are carve-out exemptions. Maybe. What's clear is that the industrial carbon tax for Alberta oil goes up. That is the price. It's not the carbon tax. That's not fair. The price you pay for carbon goes up in Alberta first. I think it's in April of 2026. So that definitely will occur because the Alberta government has previously had capped it. Now they're going to raise it to $130, I think, a ton. And so they're going to pay additional tax there at that level. And in exchange, there's a carved out possible path, which I guess is better than nothing, but that does not mean it's something. And so what this is really political because the Premier of Alberta can go back and say, hey, I got these exemptions. Look how great this is. The Prime Minister of Canada can say, I understand that the auto industry is dying. People are being laid off in Ontario, et cetera. We must be an oil and gas superpower. And so I've done these carve outs. But there's a long way to go before there's any pipeline occurring here. There's no private investor, which is required. The consent of Indigenous people has to occur. Some are saying no, some are being quiet. The Premier of British Columbia has to be involved. He's saying no. The Bloc Québécois is saying they're going to block it. And so it's not clear what this is other than a political document. Is it a better political document than what occurred Wednesday night? Sure. But that's all this is. So don't mistake this for economic development or growth. It's not that. But I imagine a lot of Canadians will think it is. That's how the Liberal Party will sell it.
Well, the media will.
And the media, well,
Yeah.
same thing. They're bought and paid for.
Yeah.
So that's how it's going to be sold. But it isn't that if you actually look at it. I actually have the memorandum of understanding on my other screen. So I was looking at that as we go. And that's what it is. In law, an agreement to agree is not enforceable.
Right. But let's talk
but
about
there is a political price.
But let's talk about the Indigenous part. Like we are saying that there has to be Indigenous agreement, but I was trying to find it before we started taping the show today. But there was an older Supreme Court decision about a pipeline that said Indigenous agreement wasn't necessary according to the Constitution. So it got overruled, right? So they were able to overrule that, which I think the Prime Minister would have that opportunity now because it is a previous decision in the Supreme Court, if I'm correct, would be able to say, no, we're going to overrule that and we're going to put the pipeline in. Right now, the way both of you have described it is, yes, I agree. Listen, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Good for Carney for at least sitting down with Premier Smith, and good for him for making an MOU. Now the devil is in the details, and then in the next steps, that's what has to happen. But I'm a little, not concerned. I'm a little shocked about how a pipeline, which will help the entire country, is again dividing the country. Where, Lawrence, you said Quebec's going to not support it. Obviously, EB and BC is not going to support it. In fact, a recent poll just out showed Manitobans don't support a pipeline. And we get the transfer payments from Alberta and Manitoba. So does Quebec.
That's really shocking. I've not seen that poll. And if it's true, it's funny. So what there is a duty to consult with Indigenous peoples in good faith. There is not a duty to consult forever. There's just a duty to consult in good faith, as should be happening. As I said that in the CO Silica example in Manitoba and other resource development issues, set a time limit, negotiate, for sure consult in good faith, but there isn't a veto at law. But in politics, different question than in law. Will those indigenous groups go out and barricade, stand on highways and do whatever if they don't get their way, whatever that means? Maybe. On the other hand, might they agree because they'll have an equity stake in the pipeline? In this example, if there is a pipeline, they're going to get an equity stake in it, and that will mean money for Indigenous groups. On the other hand, from some Indigenous groups' perspective, the risk of an oil spill. I read one chief was talking about what happened in Alaska with what was it called? The Exxon Valdez.
Valdez, yeah.
Yeah. So he talks about the disaster that occurred there, and he will not let that occur. Having said that, does science support that 10, 20 years later, is it still a disaster? It's a different question. I'm not suited to answer that question. But all of this to say, this is a political document and the repercussions are political. They're not really economic at this stage. They may turn into something economic, but right now they're not.
But I think it sends the right message, Royce, doesn't it, to investors?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But investors, of course, are smart people, and they're looking at whether or not anything is going to come of it. If it really is just a political document, then they're going to see that. They probably already know that. With these First Nations in BC, this proposed pipeline, it would cross over several of them. Some of them are fine with it, excited about it. They would be in favor of it. Some aren't. Right. And then in some First Nations, the elected council will, I think, they'll tend to be okay with it, and the hereditary chiefs will be opposed to it. And that will, it's a very complex situation. So I think Lawrence is right. There's no doubt that the federal government can do this. I mean, we can't. That's why we have a federal government, is to kind of build big projects across boundaries when necessary. But the political issue is a very different one. I mean, if there is a significant amount of opposition, I'm not sure Mark Carney, I'm not sure the Liberal Party has the political will to see it through in that kind of situation. If we get a lot of protests, blockades, that sort of thing around this.
Well,
Uh,
there is one politician who disagrees with us, and that would be former Minister Guilbeault. He believes that this is going through, so much so that he resigned from cabinet, and I think he's sending a message as well. Like, he's staying true to who he is and true to what he's always fought for, right or wrong. He is doing that, so I give him credit for that. But he believes this is a fait accompli. Is that how you pronounce that? That it's a done deal, right? So he left cabinet, gave up money, gave up stature, everything, because he believes this is the wrong thing to do.
J'ai quelque chose à dire. I have something to say about Monsieur Guilbeault. Um, First of all, this guy was the Minister of Canadian Identity. Having him be the Minister of Canadian Identity is like having me and all of my 5 foot 5 inches play center on the Toronto Raptors. It's a ridiculous concept. What this man knows about Canadian identity is beyond me. So the fact that he's out of that portfolio, probably a good thing for all of us. There's two theories about
Okay,
this that I
before you go any further, though, give him credit for sticking to his guns.
I'm going to talk about that right now.
Okay.
So there's two possibilities. One possibility that I've read is that this is cover, and this is a little conspiratorial, is that Mr. Carney gets to say within the Liberal caucus that he has at one and the same time environmentalists that he's actually appeasing. And when you look at the MOU, it doesn't actually build a pipeline. It does talk about emissions. The first thing that happens is the price you pay for carbon goes up. That's the very first thing.
In
So
Alberta.
so he can claim an environmental victory on that. At the same time, it opens the door. And Kevin, you asked earlier, like, wouldn't business think this is good? Well, I come back to it's better than Wednesday, but the fundamental structure is still wrong. It's still like these are carve out exceptions that aren't constitutional. They can be changed. So it's still a problem. So back to Mr. Guilbeault. So that's one option. The other is that he stuck to his guns and stuck to what he believes in, but yet stays in caucus. What's he going to do in caucus? Is he going to, keep causing trouble? And there's a lot of reports now about Mélanie Joly leaving, although she's denied that she wants an ambassadorial post. So it seems that there's something is turning there. And another really good question, I got to say, based on the MOU, Mr. Carney will go up in the polls with likely a spring election. And what does that mean for the review for Mr. Poilievre? I just throw it out as a question. And I am a big fan of Mr. Poilievre. He's a principled, moral guy. But with mainstream media that's going to sell this as if the pipeline is being built tomorrow and we're going to get billions and billions of dollars, that's not the reality, but that's what a lot of Canadians are going to be duped into believing. And it's a problem for the Conservatives as to how they balance their response to this MOU.
So we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. Royce, I want to get your opinion on Guilbeault as well, because it was you. I don't know if it was on the last episode or a couple of episodes ago. I believe it was you anyways, that said there was some issues within the Liberal caucus, and it was the environmentalists that were causing some problems for Prime Minister Carney. And now we see one of them has walked away from cabinet. So, and it was you that said that. Am I right?
Yes, yeah, I'll take credit for that. The media spent weeks, wall-to-wall coverage focused on the defection of the MP Chris d'Entremont from the Conservatives to the Liberals. What's this going to do to Poilievre's leadership? But it's so exciting. And now we actually have the resignation of a minister. And as you noted, it is quite a remarkable thing. Resigning on principle is a big thing. You give up this big salary boost, you give up a driver, you give up influence and power. This is someone who's been a minister for a very long time. And so it is very noteworthy, but it is a result of a lot of kind of conflict that's happening within the Liberal Party right now between a group of environmentalist MPs who have been very used to getting their way with Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister and now aren't as much. And so what we've gotten are some accounts of meetings that led up to this MOU run by Carney and by the Natural Resources Minister, Tim Hodgson, in which they just basically dismiss these concerns. They say you need to be less ideological, give it a rest, and also dismissing the concerns of British Columbia MPs who think that they're going to lose their seats as a result of this MOU and potentially a pipeline. That could be the case, but they really didn't manage those egos, those concerns. You know, caucus management is such an important part of the job. And they really kind of flubbed this. And so I think the interesting thing now is, are there more people coming? Is Jonathan Wilkinson from British Columbia? Some people have mentioned Gregor Robertson, but I don't think that's going to happen. He's too much of a unprincipled careerist. He's not going to resign. That could be coming over the next few days or the next few weeks. And as we know, the media loves nothing more than disunity. There's something else that came out of the NDP debate yesterday.
Is this the French but not French debate?
Yes, but it's relevant to Guilbeault. These people asked them, would you welcome Guilbeault into the NDP if he decided to defect? And of course, these goofballs said, no, he wouldn't be welcome. Hey, please try to win for once. Just take a win, please. And they all said, oh no, he wouldn't be welcome in the NDP. We're above it all. Like that could actually be a real kind of a real win for the NDP. I think they should be more open to that.
Well, it's not really something you want to say, especially with the potential of a spring election, right, Lawrence? I mean, you're basically throwing in the towel.
Well, I don't agree with that. Actually, one of the hidden winners from the MOU might be the Conservative Party of Canada because of the very problems that Royce just identified. If we can imagine a scenario where BC seats that are Liberal now turn NDP, as well as in Quebec, and I imagine some of the leadership candidates were rather concerned that Mr. Guilbeault could take over and become the leader of the NDP, which would have threatened their position. But if they're able to turn those seats and the Conservative Party is able to keep the same level of support it had in the last election, guess what happens, folks? We get a Conservative government. So there's a whole other path that might happen out of this MOU if people on the left actually think that this is a pipeline, that this MOU is a pipeline, and takes away the shipping issue and all of that. That could be a huge boon for Mr. Poilievre. So there's so many ways this could go. It's really, really fascinating from a political point of view.
Well, and I think though, I'll give Carney credit. He knows that the pipeline is important. We need to get our resources to other countries. You know, we've talked about that. We talked about it at length on this show. And I think that the pipeline, yes, I agree. It's just an MOU right now. Does have to move forward, and it is going to create some political debate and some very interesting times leading into what could be a spring election. But we do have, let's go back now to the Poilievre review coming up at the end of January. And today we find out that Canada's economy in the third quarter actually rebounded. And we are at 2.6% growth in the Canadian economy in the third quarter. So things are looking, it's like Mr. Carney should be wearing shades. Things are looking very bright right now. Does that help Poilievre going into his leadership review in January when he's not really gaining any traction and Carney is still gaining traction in the polls?
Royce, you're up.
I don't think it matters. Poilievre is very popular in the party. In terms of the economic numbers, the government is spending lots and lots and lots of money in response to the tariffs right now. In some ways, that can be a reflection of that. And so even just a couple of days ago, there was a whole new suite of supports going to different industries to help them get through this period of tariffs from the Americans. Well, where's that money coming from? I mean, it's just more inflationary spending. It's coming from taxpayers. It's going to add to the deficit. It's going to add to the debt, and that's going to have to be paid for eventually. And we've come out of 10, 11 years of more and more and more spending, no matter economic conditions. It's just more and more spending. Eventually, we're going to have to pay for that. And so I have concern about this. And the better solution, of course, is to get some sort of relief from the US tariffs, which Carney has failed to do. We're now the only G7 country that doesn't have a deal, that hasn't gotten some kind of relief, not get rid of them altogether, but some kind of relief at 30% tariffs on our biggest industries. And they're not even meeting. There's not even negotiations happening right now. In fact, when Prime Minister was asked when the last time he'd actually spoken to Trump was, he's, who cares? Who cares? I don't have a burning issue to speak to him about it. Thousands of Canadians in the auto sector and now in other places are losing their jobs in forestry, being thrown onto the unemployment lines. He doesn't care. There's not a burning issue to talk about.
But doesn't that buy him votes? Like, right? Like the whole elbows up and Lawrence's chicken dance start. Doesn't that buy Carney some votes with those that put him into office right now? Like, for some reason, I put out a column about how, our inflation, and I think you retweeted it, Royce, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. About the fact that 99% or 90% of what we buy right now in Canada is tariff free anyways. But I got all kinds of comments from people saying that I love Trump too much. I was a bad person. I'm not Canadian. I'm anti-Canadian. But the reality is the reality. 90% of what you get today is tariff free. So isn't it helpful? I'm sorry, isn't it helpful for Carney to be that, who cares if we talk?
Tom O'Kerr said he was so happy with that. Who cares? The who cares was like a jilted lover, a kind of like an angry response that we saw. And it's with respect, stupid, because there's no replacing the United States. And CUMSA or USMCA or whatever we want to call it is coming up for renewal in 2026.
Review.
For review. I said renewal. I was being optimistic. For review in 2026, probably around the time of the next federal election. And so what does all of this mean? Because there is no additional pipeline to the East Asia. There's nothing going west, or nothing additional going west. So what does this mean? There's huge jeopardy. Again, I'm not saying the MOU is bad, but it doesn't actually build what has to happen. What has to happen is an agreement with the United States and structural change to make Canada desirable. I don't know how we grew 2.6%. I think that just came out this morning. You have to do a deeper dive to see what actually grew it. I'd be shocked if it was government spending, actually, that it shouldn't have that kind of effect. Despite the deficits, despite everything else you said, Royce, being correct, but it shouldn't have had that kind of effect. So I don't know what that was in, but we'll have to study that more. But in the long term, I don't think, I agree with Royce, I don't think it matters to Mr. Poilievre, which was your question. But that I hope he shifts a little bit and let other people do the cross-examining, and he does a little more humane stuff. And we've talked about that before. And I'm going to now cast us all back a long time ago to when Mr. Trudeau took his long walk in the woods and resigned, and then Joe Clark's minority government fell, and the Liberals won a majority government with Mr. Trudeau. But Mr. Trudeau didn't say anything. They kept him under wraps. They kept him quiet because he wasn't really. People vote against, not for. And that's going to be Mr. Poilievre's problem. Are people going to be angry enough at that point with Mr. Carney? I don't know the answer to that. Or will the NDP take enough of the vote back that Mr. Poilievre can just keep what he's got and get into government that way? Those are the questions.
The other thing is that some of these growth numbers, they don't change some of the on-the-ground experiences of Canadians, affordability concerns, housing affordability. That's all there. It's all been there for years. And by a lot of measures, it's worse. And, the last election was a kind of Trump blip. But all the things that led to Pierre being popular, very popular, prior to that election are still there. All the affordability concerns. And so I think this leadership review we just kind of got to get it out of the way. And then after that, I think that Pierre has much wider leeway to do the kinds of things that we've talked about that Lawrence mentioned. I think that showing his softer side is something that's going to benefit him. But for now, they're focused on the leadership vote, and I would just wait until after that to see what things are going to look like with him.
Well, I think you're right, and some facts about the numbers that I'm just looking up here now, is that what's dragging our economy, why it didn't grow more, is that in the last quarter there was a big decline in household spending, and that's fewer purchases of vehicles. People aren't purchasing cars anymore. Those big ticket items are actually slowing down, right? Domestic demand, which encompasses all spending in an economy, for consumers, government, and businesses, was actually negative, slightly negative in the third quarter. So we could see a big change in the fourth quarter when Statistics Canada comes out with these numbers. And you want to talk about Polyev. I think it's something he's still going to have to go back to, because if you have good news, it's still good news, right? It's something that Carney can talk about. It's something the mainstream media is going to talk about. And I think that the party will have to face some of this going forward, which brings me to the point with, do you think it was the right decision for the Conservative Party to change who will be running their elections? They've picked somebody new who will take them through a next federal election, which this panel believes will be sometime in the spring. But they have changed up the person. Will that change up the approach? Do you think that will give them that softer approach? And I don't like to say softer. I just want somebody who's going to be real. It's really
So
what I want.
I agree with that, Kevin. But just back for a second, I just want to add the unemployment rate in Windsor now is double digits.
Hmm.
In other parts of Southern Ontario, it's like 9%. There's a whole different reality in that vote-rich area in Ontario and Southern Ontario that will play directly into Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives' hands, thank God, as it should. And so that's a really important factor to note. So there's different realities depending where you are in Canada. What's new? That's always been the case. As to the change in who's running his Mr. Poilievre's campaign, I think it's a great thing. There's no question that there were missteps before. It's easy. Hindsight is 2020, as they say. So I'm not wanting to pick on Ms. Byrne, who I don't know. I also don't know Mr. Outhouse, who's the new person, but he's had great success in Newfoundland. He had great success with a leadership race previously in the Conservative Party. So he seems like a smart guy, really weathered, been around a long time, and they need the change. So I think it's a positive for him.
Yeah, Steve Outhouse. Apparently, that's a relatively common last name in Atlantic Canada. I'll won't make any comment on that. I won't let the 8-year-old boy come out. This is a guy who has run all sorts of conservative campaigns in Canada.
With
He ran,
success.
yes, yeah, he ran the leadership campaign for the MP Leslyn Lewis, who is real social conservative. He ran the campaign for Tony Wakeham in Newfoundland, who is not a social conservative, a kind of standard Atlantic red Tory, who nobody thought was going to win that election. Like literally no one, not even Tony Wakeham's mom thought he was going to win that. And they turned that around in the election campaign. He managed, all sorts of things, but the big one is Danielle Smith's last election campaign. Danielle Smith is a politician that I really like, but she is not always the most disciplined politician. I think everyone would admit that. And in the last election campaign, she ran a very successful, very disciplined campaign. And I think you have to give the Outhouse some credit for that. And so, is this a good choice? Absolutely. I don't want to comment on Jenny Byrne. I mean, these are hard jobs, and it's easy to be the armchair quarterback on this kind of thing. But there's a lot of people in the party who she's basically yelled at. You rub enough people the wrong way, it's people aren't motivated in the long term over that kind of thing. And so having someone new, someone with a different approach, and someone with a record of success, yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about that.
And the Premier of Alberta was down in the polls significantly before she won her majority, just a few months before. So Mr. Outhouse really did an amazing turnaround there. And remember, Ms. Byrne also, if I remember correctly, Mr. Ford's group was fighting with Ms. Byrne's group. And so there was that real disunity within conservatism in Canada. And Mr. Ford ended up being a great cheerleader. That's a funny image for Mr. Carney. But that's how it went. So I'm hoping Mr. Outhouse will be able to turn that around as well. There can't be disunity if we're going to win. And I hope he builds unity in the NDP as well, because that's the sure pathway to win.
Well, both of you are now, allowing your 8-year-old selves to come out.
I didn't say anything.
Well, I mean, come on, that he could be it's an interesting picture Ford as a cheerleader. Let's be honest.
Ford in a cheerleader uniform. Yeah.
I
Thanks,
know.
Lawrence.
Now, this actually is a great segue into what I want to talk about next, sadly. And it's the Thursday session of the Manitoba Legislature. As a former MLA, I've never been more disappointed in elected officials than what I saw. Royce and I, you were talking about it earlier. You went back to watch it. I had to go back to watch some of it. Both parties, the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba, the NDP Party of Manitoba, who is government under Wabkanu, both of them were acting like 10-year-olds outside on school recess. You're getting nothing done for the government. You had Minister Nahanni Fontaine, who is known to be, quite the activist and very outspoken. She shared a post on social media that, celebrated, if you will, the death of Charlie Kirk. She, in the legislature, called all men in the Conservative Party misogynist. And in turn, we got, the conservatives yelling at Wab Kinew about, criminal offenses that he has against him from 20 years ago that he has been pardoned for, and blah, 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 back and forth, back and forth. Nothing got done for the people of Manitoba in that entire day. And that, Royce, because you've challenged me about this before, is why I say, as a former politician, question period is an entirely waste of time and resources for the people that you serve.
Yeah, no, I respectfully disagree. It is an opportunity for the opposition to hold the government accountable.
But they're not.
Well, I think they are to the extent that they're able to. In systems like ours in Canada and Manitoba, the premier, the cabinet are very powerful political figures. They have a lot of power. But the trade-off for that is that they have to go to question period. They have to be questioned by the opposition. The atmosphere, I think that the atmosphere in the Manitoba legislature is probably the worst in Canada right now. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. If you watch question period in the Manitoba legislature, then watch it in Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario. There's conflict, there's fighting, but nothing like what's happening in Manitoba. There's a lot of kind of personal conflict. There's kind of insults that doesn't have to be a part of question period. You can hold the government accountable without engaging in that kind of stuff. But right. I think that ultimately, and I've been thinking about this a long time. I mean, who do you blame for this? It's easy to blame everyone. I think really the answer here is the person that sets the tone is the premier. The premier has to set the tone, and other politicians will follow, including the opposition. And really, Wab Kinew is, he's not, doesn't cover himself in glory in question period. He's the one that sets the tone. If he wants a better atmosphere, then he can do that. And my sense is that the parties kind of respond to the tone that's set by the government. Now, is that possible? Like with Nahanni Fontaine on the government benches, I don't know. But, if that's going to happen, I think it has to start with the premier, and then that change will kind of percolate down to the other members as well.
Doesn't it have to be policed by the speaker? I mean, that's what the speaker is there for.
Yes.
And the speaker got into the name calling.
He did. He made a mistake yesterday. What did he say? A Tory MLA was not clever. He wasn't being, you're not clever.
Yeah.
that was an error, I think, and he did apologize for it at the end. But Tom Lindsay, the NDP MLA, I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into when he became speaker. I think it's a very difficult job, and I don't know. I mean, for the opposition, for the PCs, I think you kind of need to think about, what's the point of this? What are we getting out of this? How many people are watching? How often does this get covered in the media? Because that's the goal of question period, is to get your questions covered in the media. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you get clips for social media. That's all good. That's a way to hold the government accountable. But we should be concerned about the atmosphere. It's a bit much.
But let's remember, a couple of years ago, the leader of the opposition to the Progressive Conservatives, Abi Khan, was a minister in the then conservative government. And, he accused Wab Kinew, then leader of the opposition, that, he pushed him or he punched him or some kind of physical activity at an NDP event that was held in the Manitoba legislature. So this is nothing new. And I do agree with you. If we were able to stand up at question period and we were actually asking important questions, or we were providing some solutions where we could get into a debate, then it would be worth its time. But listen, you have meetings before question period as these parties and talk about who's going to go after who. You talk about, you're given one-liners and you're given sheets of paper and stuff. And if you look, a lot of them are reading from a sheet of paper that was written by somebody else to stand up and try to take a shot, because that's what's most important to the politicians, is that they get better shots in, because really both of them made promises during the election. And I was on that team that I can tell you were never going to be fulfilled. And so you really voted for the person that, fooled you the most. Now I see them in question period, and there was high school students there. I just think it is unbecoming of a professional. There should be a decorum like there is in court, Lawrence.
Yes, the court is a place of decorum. I'll agree with Royce, though, that really the notion of question period in the Westminster system is a brilliant innovation in the history of politics, holding government to account. You don't really see that elsewhere. You see a different version of it because of how the American Constitution has set up the government, what they do down there. But as a concept, it's a great concept. It's like singing. Just because some people aren't singing well, it doesn't mean you ban singing or songs. Just because they're not playing question period well here, and the speaker may not be doing his job well, doesn't mean that you say enough of question period. I would not want to lose that. I recall a speaker in the United Kingdom recently really cracked the whip there. When people got out of hand, he stood up and hollered at them. It made for some funny social media. I'm not sure if you saw it, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was really spot on, and he actually developed a following, which probably went to his head because he's a politician. But it really was interesting. So this speaker, it sounds like he went off script in saying what he said. I'm amazed that both of you watched question period in Manitoba. You are the two people apparently in Manitoba who actually watched it. I guess your prescriptions for whatever you're on was filled, that you could stomach watching that stuff. But I confess I didn't watch it. And the way you're describing it, it sounds really atrocious. There's a lot of important stuff to talk about in Manitoba. Our economy is faltering. Whether Mr. Kinew is or isn't a termite, whether he's a bully or not a bully, really is a sideshow. Talk about the economy. It is all about the economy, or should be. Talk about safety on the street. There was just an article I read, and I can't remember how old this woman was. She waited 30 hours at Grace Hospital until she died without getting proper treatment. Talk about that, for God's sake. Don't do this name-calling nonsense. And as for Ms. Fontaine, who said that every male is a misogynist, I think she needs help. Like we saw it with Charlie Kirk. She comes from a difficult background, so I give her full marks for rising up above it. But she's carrying a lot of baggage, a lot of anger, and it's just unhealthy. I think she actually believes that in what we've seen before with her, and it's just really sad for her son, Her son, is he a misogynist? Is every male a misogynist that she ever meets? How well does she know the people in the opposition to say that? Would she say it about me if I was sitting there? Because I'm anything but that. Um, so it's nonsensical to say that unless she has some information. It's a libel that you can't action because it's in the House, but it's a libel that's so beneath decorum, and the speaker should have shut that down immediately.
So that's where I want to stop. So I'll point out that both of you like the idea of question period. And I'm saying if it's going to be actual debate and you're going to provide solutions, then okay. But both of you also say that nobody watches question period. So really, what are we doing then? Really, it's theater. It's theater for the media so that hopefully you can get some media marks or you can get some
Yeah.
social media tapes and all that kind of stuff. That's really what it is right now. And I think we all have to agree that there needs to be a way to stop that. And I'll go to what you just said, is you can't be litigated for what you say in the legislature. So in other words, you're allowed to lie. Only in politics do you put in a rule that says, well, I'm allowed to say whatever I want. And listen, I was the brunt of Nahani Fontaine. She's called me many things,
Yeah.
many things. And I've never spoken to the woman. I don't know her at all. But she's called me many names. But you can say whatever you want. You can make a claim about any other politician, no matter what it is, no matter how ridiculous it is. And she did that to me on more than one occasion. So did Bernadette Smith. And they get away with that, and you can't do anything about it because they're protected because a politician is allowed to lie in our institution.
Yeah, when I remember when you first ran in the by-election in Kirkfield Park, they were using their positions in the legislature to attack you as a candidate. I wrote about that in the Winnipeg Free Press at the time. I don't think that's an appropriate use of MLA's positions. The you said that they're only playing for the media, they're only playing for social media, but you say it like that's a bad thing. If people can actually get their questions into the media, if they can get them, effectively clip them, get them disseminated out to the wider public, that's one way to hold the government accountable. It's actually a good thing, and in my view. And this idea that politicians should ask questions on substantive issues, I agree. I think we do get that from the opposition in Manitoba. And the argument yesterday from Abhi Khan was that they were asking important questions about healthcare that people actually who
Mhm.
died while they were waiting to be seen. And they just kind of got insults in response. And so finally they were like, okay, that's it. Fine. If you want to be personal, let's go. And they started talking about Canu's past criminal convictions. I mean, I guess my response, if anyone in the PC cares or PC party cares what I think, is that Wab is he's kind of a mud wrestler. And you have to ask, like, are you going to benefit if you hop into the mud wrestling pit or pit wherever, whatever, or is it better to kind of stick to the substantive issues? Keep clipping, get emotional about things that you should be emotional about. People dying while they're waiting in the waiting room at a Winnipeg hospital. Yeah, you should be emotional about that. You should be angry about that. You can convey that. But that can be done without some of the other stuff that we're seeing. WAB is always going to respond with that kind of thing. The opposition has choices about how they approach that.
I've got to say though, if not if Wob does seem to be a bully in the House, in a really rude and childish, street fighty, mud pit, as you said, kind of way. And he does have a conviction for assault for which he was pardoned. Um, but it just seems so unbecoming. And it's so fascinating to me how many Manitobans like him, because he also, outside of that, in social media, you see the smiley Wob Canoe, not the street bully, but he behaves like a street bully. So I agree that the Conservatives have to think about how to deal with that problem, and how to get Manitobans to understand who their premier really is, what's behind that Cheshire smile, and focus on the real issues, as I said before, healthcare, the economy, crime. These are major problems that you can't mask with a Cheshire grin, although so far Premier Canoe has been successful at doing that. And I come back to what I said last week, which is what the late writer Mr. Ross said. He might be a cricket trying to bring down the system from within. Not a cricket, I'm sorry, a termite trying to bring down the system from within. I had the wrong insect. But I think the Conservatives really have to think long and hard about that, what to do with that. Uh, and I agree with you, Royce, that clipping out social media pieces and sending it out there is a form of accountability. And I wish there was more intelligent work done in question period, but I would not abolish it. I'd
But
make it better.
it's who we're electing, though, too, right? I mean, if you look at the NDP, there's a lot of activists that are members of the NDP. Lots and lots and lots of activists that are members of the NDP that like that kind of banter. They thrive on that kind of banter. They like the stage, if you will, right? It's a stage for them, which is why I call it theater. People are listening. I agree with everything both of you are saying, but and I'm going to throw something into the mix just for a couple of seconds because I like to blame the media. And yeah, we're in the media. In fact, if you want to read about that woman who waited 30 hours and then ended up dying, it's at winnipegsun.com. You can read about that horrific story that is going to be investigated, or an inquest is going to be done for that, which is great. But it shouldn't be used as a negative in the legislature. But the media seems to want to pick on all that negativity. That's their headlines, right? If it bleeds, it leads, and they don't seem to pick on or focus in on the important questions. So is media part of that problem, and are they feeding the frenzy inside the legislature?
Well, in
Um,
my view, ethics wouldn't suggest that the media tail should wag the dog politic. You can rise above it. I have seen in some question periods in many different jurisdictions where it has been useful. It's been intelligent that you actually get something. I've heard a government, I remember seeing a government say, oh, I'm going to investigate that and come back and report where some new issue is raised. That's the purpose of it. And does the media feed it? Sure. If it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. If it's not with the Jews, it's not news. All these, expressions about how biased and morally bankrupt to some degree the media is to sell papers, and it's nothing new. It's been that way really forever. Royce, I'll turn over to you, but that like a moral, ethical politician should not be leaning into the media as much as they do to just have this, as you said, Kevin, this sort of this junior high or elementary schoolyard stupidity, frankly.
Yeah, you actually you raised a really interesting point, Kevin. The idea that the premier, the leader of the opposition, they give this kind of rousing, insulting answer, and their caucus all cheers behind them, and they stand up and clap, and oh, and it's like you're at a sports event. I get it. I get that a leader has to motivate the team. They have to keep the team motivated, keep them feeling good, keep them feeling confident. But a lot of stuff that happens in the legislature, you're fundamentally right, Kevin. An awful lot of it is not going to have any effect on any outcome. It's not going to change the next election. Like every once in a while you get a clip, every once in a while you get to hold a minister accountable. That's great. But I do worry, we spend all this energy on something that not a whole lot of people are going to see. It's possible to get caught up in the moment and be distracted from the things that you should be worried about. Good governance, actual accountability. I mean, how much time do ministers spend prepping for, how much time does the premier spend prepping for question period?
About
I
an
mean,
hour.
yeah, I mean, that's an hour out of the day. How much time does the opposition spend practicing? I would much rather see, ministers focused on their portfolios. Although, we don't even hear from ministers very often in question period
Royce,
anymore. It's the Wob show.
they're spending their time doing social media little videos. They're doing TikTok type videos. That's what the premier does. That's what Ms. Fontaine does. That's how they spend their time. It's amazing. It's not, and look at crime, look at healthcare, look at economic development.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we got
I
a liquor trailer by Costco.
I
so I
heard
heard.
about that. Yeah. The
That
you
was
know
a video.
the other frame to understand here is that the biggest open secret in Manitoba right now is that Wab wants to move to federal politics, and really have to kind of interpret everything you see in provincial politics through that now. He's, auditioning for a role, it feels like, that is coming in the next few years. And so I think that explains some of what we're seeing as well.
That's a good discussion. So we kind of talked a little bit about the fact that we're probably going to see a federal election sometime before May 1st. That's the belief, though, and it's getting kind of confirmed more and more as you see things happening across the country. But maybe we'll see a provincial election in Manitoba sometime in August. I think late summer. I don't think they'll do it in the fall because there's municipal elections happening across Manitoba in the fall. But I think you'll see an election happen in the late part of summer in Manitoba, and that could be why all this theatrics is happening, right? It gets people going, it gets the social media going, it gets everything kind of happening. It keeps your opposition at bay, if you will, or puts everybody up on their toes and they're not thinking about what's really important, which is what Lawrence has said, healthcare. I mean, this isn't the first person that died waiting in a Manitoba emergency room. And every elected official should be embarrassed and should be working right now trying to fix that problem. That should be their number one issue right now. But instead, like you said, they've got their staff working on one-liners. They're digging up dirt they can use during question period. They're doing all this when really they should be saying, you know what? Why don't we spend the next hour and a half talking about how we can all fix this? Because not another Manitoban or Canadian should die in a waiting room.
Imagine if that was the speech that was made by the opposition. We're not getting into the dirt with you, yes, Mr. Premier. This is where we have to focus. Here's our solution. Here's our innovation. Because dollars to donuts, the NDP would come back with more dirt, and that will lead to maybe some accountability, unfortunately, through social media. But
it also shows me, Lawrence, like what you're saying, shows me that they're ready for government. They're a government in waiting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The irony is that politics is run by partisans, but most people aren't partisan.
Yeah.
They're not interested in little conflicts or kind of these long-standing things. And so it's sometimes hard for partisan people to remember that. They get caught up in their own drama, their own fights. But I think you got to keep that front and center. People want to see results. They're concerned about substantive issues related to things like healthcare. And I would do more to keep that in mind and stay above some of these kinds of party conflicts that aren't of interest to most people, to be honest.
Right.
I think Manitobans want a party that is both fiscally and socially intelligent. And it seems to me sometimes you get one or the other, sometimes you get neither, but Manitobans need a party that has both fiscal intelligence and social intelligence. So as soon as we figure that one out,
we'll be in great shape.
Great shape at that point.
We'll be in great shape. Gentlemen, I appreciate the discussion. Remember, you can read Lawrence's columns, Royce's columns, as well as mine at winnipegsun.com anytime you wish. And we would appreciate your support in reading our stuff online and commenting. We get lots of great comments here on YouTube. And believe it or not, all three of us talk about them. We do talk about the comments that come up, and we share them with each other. I respond to some of them, so it's always nice to see your engagement with our little podcast or program here, Inside Politics. So please tell your friends about it. Make sure you we do this for Royce, smash the like button or the follow button, and also share. Guys, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegssun.com for more.